Imagine your own sister looking your children in the eye and telling them they aren't good enough to carry the family name. Now, imagine her face when she realizes my quiet, unassuming husband is the one man holding the pen to her $45 million career. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in this case, it was served in a high-rise boardroom with a side of absolute silence. My sister Monica has always been the golden child, the one our parents put on a pedestal because she could close a deal before most people finished their morning coffee. She lived in a world of high-gloss marble and designer heels, looking down on my life as a simple mother and teacher. For years, I bit my tongue as she made snide comments about my house, my clothes, and my average husband, Mark. But the moment she targeted my children was the moment the game changed forever. Monica didn't realize that while she was busy shouting about her success, my husband was busy actually owning the companies she was desperate to work for. This isn't just a story about a family argument. It's a story about what happens when arrogance meets the one person who can actually say no. Stick around because you won't believe the look on her face when the paper pusher husband she mocked turned out to be the man who could end her empire with a single phone call. Growing up, Monica was the hurricane, and I was the steady breeze. She was the one who got the private tutors, the expensive tennis lessons, and the Ivy League education, while I was happy with my books and my local university. Our parents, especially our mother, fed into this narrative that Monica was destined for greatness, while I was destined for a quiet, comfortable life. It was a polite way of saying they didn't expect much from me. By the time Monica was 30, she was a high-level executive at a top-tier real estate investment firm. She moved in circles where the cheapest watch cost more than my car. I, on the other hand, had married Mark. To my family, Mark was just a nice guy who worked in tech consulting. He was quiet, wore plain hoodies, and preferred working from his home office rather than going to flashy galas. Monica called him the human equivalent of beige. She would constantly ask me if I was bored with my life or if I ever regretted not marrying someone with more ambition. I just smiled and told her I was happy. I didn't feel the need to tell her that Mark's tech consulting was actually a venture capital firm that specialized in bailing out companies just like the one she worked for. We liked our quiet life. We liked our privacy. But most of all, we liked that nobody knew just how much power Mark actually held. The tension finally boiled over during our mother's 60th birthday dinner. It was held at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, and of course, Monica had picked the venue to show off. She spent the first hour of dinner talking loudly on her phone about a $45 million development deal she was finalizing. She keeps saying things like, "The investors are practically begging me to take their money, and I'm the only one who can make this happen." My two children, Leo and Mia, were being perfectly well behaved, but they were kids and they were talking about their upcoming science fair. Monica suddenly snapped. She looked at my 10-year-old son and said, "Leo, can you please stop talking about baking soda volcanoes? Some of us are discussing actual world-changing events." I felt a sting in my chest, but I tried to keep the peace. I told her they were just excited. That's when she turned her gaze on me, her eyes cold and full of disdain. She said, "You know, Sarah, it's a shame. These kids have the family DNA, but they don't have the drive. They aren't good enough to really make a mark on this world. They're going to end up just like their father, content being invisible." The table went dead silent. My mother didn't say a word, and my father just looked at his plate. But Mark, my quiet husband, just set his fork down and looked Monica straight in the eye for the first time in years. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that made you peaceful. My kids were confused and hurt, asking me if they were really not good enough. It broke my heart to see the doubt in their eyes because of their aunt's cruelty. Once the kids were in bed, I sat in the kitchen, fuming. I was ready to call Monica and scream, but Mark, my quiet husband, walked in and put a hand on my shoulder. He wasn't angry, he was calm, which was somehow more terrifying. He told me she thinks the world revolves around her because she's never met the person who owns the axis. I asked him what he meant. He sat down and opened his laptop, showing me a series of emails. It turned out that the $45 million deal Monica was so proud of was being funded by a holding company called Apex Group, and Apex Group was one of the many subsidiaries under Mark's firm. Monica's entire career, her promotion, and her reputation were riding on this one deal closing by Monday morning. The lead investor at Apex had sent Mark a final memo asking for his signature to release the funds. Mark looked at me and said, "She wants to talk about who is good enough for this family. Let's see how she handles the real world without the money she thinks she's already earned." Monday morning arrived, and Monica was already posting on social media about her big win and her unmatched success. She sent a group text to the family saying, "Just closed the biggest deal of my life, raising a glass to those of us who actually work for our luxury." I didn't reply. Neither did Mark. He had already left for a meeting downtown. Around 10 a.m., my phone started blowing up. It was Monica. I ignored the first 3 calls, but finally I picked up. She was hysterical. She was screaming that the deal had been flagged and the funding was being pulled at the last second. She said the investors were claiming the risk profile had changed, and they no longer felt she was the right person to lead the project. I played dumb and asked her what happened to being the only one who can make this happen. She cursed at me and hung up. A few minutes later, our mother called, crying that Monica was going to lose her job and that we needed to do something. I told her since I was just a simple teacher and Mark was just a beige paper pusher, there wasn't much we could do. But the real drama was just beginning because the final meeting to discuss the risk profile was scheduled for 2 p.m. that afternoon. Monica arrived at the corporate headquarters of the lead investor looking like a ghost. She had her assistant and her legal team with her, ready to fight for the deal. She walked into the boardroom demanding to see the person in charge. She was told the chairman of the board was coming in personally to deliver the final decision. She sat at that long mahogany table, straightening her blazer, trying to summon that arrogant energy she used to belittle my children just 2 nights ago. The double doors at the end of the room opened, and in walked the chairman. It wasn't an old man in a 3-piece suit. It was Mark. He was wearing his usual plain navy sweater and dark jeans. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like the man who does the crossword puzzle on the train. Monica's jaw literally dropped. She actually stood up and said, "Mark? What are you doing here? Did you get a job in the mailroom?" Mark didn't smile. He didn't even acknowledge her comment. He just sat at the head of the table and opened a folder. He looked at the room and said, "The funding for the Riverside project is officially terminated. We've decided that the leadership on this deal doesn't meet our standards for long-term integrity." The room was so quiet you could hear Monica's rapid breathing. She looked at her legal team, but they were staring at Mark with total reverence. They knew exactly who he was. Finally, Monica found her voice and stammered, "You can't do this. This is personal. You're doing this because of what I said at dinner." Mark looked up from the folder, his expression completely neutral. He said, "Actually, Monica, you were the one who brought up DNA and drive. I did a deep dive into your project's ethics and your management style. It turns out when you look down on people you deem not good enough, you overlook the very people who make your success possible. You're a liability, not an asset. And as for my kids, they are exactly where they need to be. They are kind, they are smart, and they have a father who protects them. You just have a $45 million hole in your resume." He then stood up, closed the folder, and told his team to escort the unauthorized personnel out of the building. Monica was escorted out by security in front of all her peers. Her big win turned into a public execution of her career. The fallout was immediate. Monica was fired by the end of the day. Without that deal, her firm couldn't justify her massive salary or the scandal she caused with her arrogance. She lost her company car, her expense account, and most of her friends who only liked her for her connections. She tried to come to our house that evening to talk, but Mark wouldn't even open the gate. He told her through the intercom that we were busy helping the kids with their science fair project, and our average life didn't have room for her drama. Our parents tried to intervene, calling us cruel and vindictive. They said we had ruined her life over a silly comment. That's when I finally spoke up. I told them if they had spent half as much time teaching Monica humility as they did praising her ego, she wouldn't be in this position. I told them that no amount of money gave her the right to insult my children. For the first time, my parents realized that they had backed the wrong daughter. The successful one was broke and bitter, while the simple one was the one they should have been respecting all along. A few months have passed now. Monica is working as a mid-level consultant for a small firm, making a fraction of what she used to. She doesn't post about luxury anymore. In fact, she's blocked us on everything. Our parents are still trying to bridge the gap, but the dynamic has shifted. They no longer talk down to Mark. In fact, they act a little nervous around him now that they know he could buy their entire neighborhood if he wanted to. But Mark hasn't changed. He still wears his hoodies, he still works from home, and he still loves helping the kids with their homework. My son Leo won first place at the science fair, by the way. He walked up onto that stage with so much confidence, and as I watched him, I realized he was more than good enough. He was incredible. He didn't need a $45 million deal to prove his worth. He just needed a family that stood up for him. Monica thought she was the one with the power, but she learned the hard way that the loudest person in the room is rarely the one in charge.